As he averted his gaze, my eyes were drawn to a distinct curve beneath the fabric, a bulge that could only be the broccoli. For reasons I couldn't explain, my hand instinctively reached for it. My fingers wrapped around it firmly, and I began to press gently. His reaction was immediate. He seemed to falter, releasing his hold and exposing the broccoli in full view. Without hesitation, he lifted me onto the dining table. The broccoli was now completely under my control, trapped in my grasp. At first, its movements were slow, deliberate, and rhythmic, almost testing the space it now occupied. "Oh, I didn't realize you were here," I said, startled by the realization of your presence. "I was just recounting the story of how it all began. Let me go back to the start so you can truly understand how events unfolded. My name is Mary, and I'm 54 years old. 2 summers ago, I became a widow. My late husband, Alfred, was not the romantic partner I had once imagined for myself. I know it sounds unkind, but the truth is that he was a stubborn man, deeply entrenched in his ways, and burdened by years of personal disappointments. Our marriage wasn't terrible. It wasn't devoid of companionship, but it lacked the spark of passion. By the time he passed, our union had become more of a duty than an expression of love. After Alfred's death, I assumed that chapter of my life was closed. I had no intentions of seeking new companionship. My days were filled with tending to my modest garden, knitting as the evenings stretched on, and occasionally attending family gatherings. Life was quiet, predictable, and uneventful until Liam arrived. Liam is Alfred's grandson from his first marriage. At 27, he is tall, with striking green eyes that seem to pierce through you, and an intensity that's impossible to ignore. As a child, he was always polite yet distant, rarely lingering in conversations or seeking attention. That summer, he came to stay for a few weeks, a brief visit on his way to see his family in the countryside. At first, his presence barely disrupted the routine. Liam kept mostly to himself, wandering through the nearby woods or sitting on the porch with a book. From the kitchen window, I would occasionally find my gaze drawn to him, not in any intrusive way, but simply observing. There was something enigmatic about him, a quiet sadness, as if he were searching for something he couldn't name. It all began innocently enough. One afternoon, while struggling to repair an old wooden fence in the garden, Liam appeared and offered to help. He didn't say much. He simply picked up the tools and got to work. As I watched him, I was reminded of a younger Alfred, his broad shoulders and focused expression bringing back memories. But unlike Alfred, who often wore an air of irritation, Liam exuded patience and kindness. Days turned into weeks, and we began spending more time together. In the evenings, he would join me on the porch, sipping tea as the sky transitioned from golden hues to twilight. We would talk about everything and nothing at all. His plans, my memories, and the small, seemingly insignificant details that shape a life. His presence was comforting in a way I hadn't experienced in years. One particularly warm afternoon, I decided to tackle the attic, a space untouched since Alfred's passing. Dust particles floated in the golden sunlight, streaming through the small window as I sorted through old boxes. Liam appeared in the doorway, his shirt clinging to his skin from the heat. Without waiting for an invitation, he stepped in to help, effortlessly lifting a heavy chest that I had struggled to move. Amid the clutter, we discovered a box of photographs, memories captured in fading images. I couldn't help but smile as I showed him pictures of my younger self, recalling the stories behind them. Liam studied each photo intently, his fingers brushing the edges of the worn prints with a tenderness that surprised me. "You were beautiful," he said softly, his voice almost reverent. When his eyes met mine, there was a depth in them that I couldn't quite decipher, a mixture of curiosity, longing, and something unspoken. The air between us grew heavy, thick with unspoken emotions, until suddenly he leaned in and kissed me. The kiss was slow, almost hesitant, but firm enough to convey intention. My initial reaction was to pull back. It felt wrong, unnatural. Yet deep down, I questioned whether it was truly unwelcome. He seemed to sense my hesitation, for he moved closer, his lips meeting mine again, this time more assuredly. Before I realized it, I was responding, my own movements mirroring his. The kiss deepened, and time seemed to blur. It wasn't just a physical act. It carried a weight of emotions that neither of us fully understood. At 6:02, I noticed the protrusion of the broccoli evident above his trousers. For reasons I couldn't explain, I reached out and grasped the broccoli with my hand, applying a slight pressure. As this unfolded, he no longer held back, revealing the broccoli. He lifted me onto the dining table, and the broccoli found itself caught within its confines. It began moving slowly, a rhythmic back and forth motion, sending waves of sensation through us. The vibrations were so intense they made the wine glasses on the table tremble. Our kisses intertwined like vines wrapping around each other, binding us as though we were two halves of a single soul. In that moment, identities faded. We were simply two beings lost in mutual pleasure. My breathing quickened as the vibrations intensified. The broccoli's energy coursed through me, hot drops flowing with uncontainable excitement. As he pulled back, both of us gasped for air, the room enveloped in a gentle stillness. Morning light filtered softly through the curtains, a tender reminder of the night that had just passed. Lying there, gazing at the ceiling, my thoughts swirled in chaotic harmony. I heard Liam moving quietly around the room, the sound of his boots scraping the floor reaching my ears. Turning my head, I saw him perched on the edge of the bed, his broad shoulders tense, his back turned to me. By the door, his bag was already packed. A tightness gripped my chest. "Are you leaving?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He nodded, pausing briefly as he tied his shoelaces. Without turning, he softly replied, "I think I should go back." Sitting up, the sheets slid from my shoulders as I managed to whisper, "Why?" Finally, he faced me, his green eyes no longer sharp but softened by sorrow. "Mary, you know why," he said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "This can't continue. It isn't right. You said so yourself." Memories of last night surged back. The words I had spoken, trying to convince both of us this couldn't last. Yet with him standing there, ready to leave, I was no longer certain. "But what if I don't want you to leave?" The words escaped before I could stop them. He froze, our gazes locked in a timeless moment. Crossing the room, he knelt in front of me until we were face to face. "Mary," he said, his voice trembling slightly, betraying the effort this decision cost him. "I care about you more than I should, but staying will only hurt us both in the long run." I reached out, my fingers brushing his cheek. "It already hurts," I whispered, tears threatening to fall. "I thought I had forgotten how to feel this way, Liam, but you," my voice cracked, "you brought it back. You made me feel alive again." He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch for a fleeting moment before pulling away. "You've awakened feelings I thought I'd buried," he admitted. "But letting this continue would only make it harder for both of us." Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded, knowing he was right, even though the truth didn't make it easier. "So that's it?" My voice broke. "You're just going to leave?" He stood slowly, his movements deliberate as if each step required every ounce of his willpower. Slinging his bag over his shoulder, he paused at the door. "I'll go," he said softly, his words laced with hesitation. "But Mary, if you ever need me, you know where to find me." With that, he was gone, the door closing behind him with a finality that echoed in the empty room. For a long time, I sat in silence, staring at the void he left behind. The house felt impossibly quiet, unbearably hollow. Yet as I sat there, something began to shift within me. Yes, Liam had left, and yes, it hurt more than I could admit. But he had also left me with something invaluable, a reminder of who I was, of what I could feel and desire. Standing, I walked to the window and watched him disappear down the path into the forest. Pressing my hand against the glass, a bittersweet smile graced my lips. "Goodbye, Liam," I murmured, "and thank you." In that fleeting moment, I realized I would carry this with me, the memory of a connection that defied explanation and left me changed in ways I could never fully articulate. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.